Welcome to UFC Inside the Octagon. John Gooden alongside Dan Hardy, and today we are talking about UFC 216, specifically the flyweight title fight. So Demetrius Johnson will look to put his names in the history book one further time for most consecutive title defences. This was a fight that was supposed to happen at 2:15. Dan and I recorded an Inside the Octagon for that, and we're going to resurrect it out of the vault. Dan, Ray Borg was pulled from the fight. What was the reason?
Well, it was illness. He said there was a flu going around at the Jackson Wink camp. Obviously, you know, it took a few of the fighters out. It was unfortunate for him that it was fight week. Yeah. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it's unavoidable. I know there was speculation about his weight cutting, obviously because he's fired his weight cutting team, but he assures us that it was nothing to do with that. One thing I will say, though, is that, I mean, obviously, when you're depleting your body, your immune system does take a hit, so it does make you more vulnerable, and sometimes it is just unavoidable. But I'm glad they got to make this match again, and I think Borg deserves a crack at Demetrius Johnson, so yeah. I'm excited to see if Demetrius can handle his pressure. OK, well, everything else remains the same, as does the show, so here it is. Let's take a look at the facts and stats. There he is, with his gold over his shoulder. We've seen him there many, many times before, but we have a new challenger, Dan, and I'm just going to highlight these and get your take on what they mean for this matchup. Well, experience obviously is on Demetrius Johnson's side. You can see he's had several more wins on his record, as well as being at the higher level for a much longer time. He's coming into his prime as well, 31, 32. You've got to think these are going to be the best years of his career. So Ray Borg is arguably taking him on at the toughest time in his career. But Borg, 24, he's got that enthusiasm of youth. He's got a great record behind him and a lot of momentum coming into this fight. And, you know, the pressure's on the champion because everyone expects him to win, as we always do. So he can get in there and just have a good time and see if he can upset the boat.
You almost scuppered me there, because I thought, oh, we're going to look at DJ and say that he's the ageing fighter. But no 31 is in his prime. 7 years the senior, but actually that might not matter.
No.
Now, I want to look at these two on this side because they're defined within UFC history. Yes. Tied for longest title defence streak. Fourth most takedowns in UFC history as well. We know that he mixed it up. But, I mean, that's a really great stat.
Yeah, you know, a high work rate, obviously, you know, longest title defence streak in UFC history is very impressive. You know, obviously Anderson Silva is the other guy up there, but we always talk about Anderson Silva being the greatest of all time. Demetrius Johnson is hot on his tail. You know, I mean, with a win...
Statistically could become the greatest of all time.
With a win here, I mean, Demetrius Johnson's really pushing himself to the top of that pound-for-pound list, in my opinion. But Ray Borg has the opportunity to upset a few people here. I mean, you look at these two here, and these are the ones that stand out to me. The largest proportion of ground control among active flyweights. Now, that's important because although he's got quite a chaotic style, which we'll cover in a second, it shows that he's very good at smothering people on the floor. Now, it's going to be difficult to control Demetrius Johnson because of the speed in which he moves at and his understanding of the game. But because Borg's been in the UFC for some time now and he's already fought guys at this decent level, he's already understanding how they move when they hit the floor and what he needs to do in order to strip their base away and keep them there. And second most submission attempts in flyweight history as well. Again, we'll cover this a little later in one of the playlists, but he's always searching for the back. He's got great submission attacks. And, you know, you've got to get Demetrius Johnson out of there because he's kind of like Floyd Mayweather, you know, going back to this recent fight. If you fight him over the distance, he's going to outpoint you because he's so consistent. So you've kind of got to look for the finish against him. OK, well, we're going to put this into moving pictures now. Yeah. Rapid eye movement will be necessary. And just to sort of reflect back then on the facts and stats there and the champion and the challenger who's 7 years younger. You have a timeline that you want to show us about where they've been at in their career. Well, I think it's important to kind of set the stage because Demetrius Johnson's been a champion for a long time. Yeah. And even before he was the flyweight champion, he was contending at the highest level at bantamweight as well. So it's important, in my opinion, to see where Ray Borg was at this point because he's been watching Demetrius Johnson since he was 14. He's grown up in the DJ era. So, you know, a lot of these flyweights that are coming up have been inspired by the man that's the champion. So it must be strange. I mean, this is his first amateur fight before he turned pro. And immediately he's jumping on people. He's got a real instinct for strangulation. You'll look for him searching for the back all the time, getting his hooks in. But that chaotic style that he's got all of a sudden stops when he takes the back. He's chaotic in his striking style, chaotic in his takedowns, very aggressive and very powerful. But as soon as he takes the back, it's very difficult to shake him. And sometimes he's not even interested in getting the hooks in before he starts to chase the neck. Now, at the same time as this was happening, Demetrius Johnson was contending for the bantamweight belt against Dominic Cruz. Again, one of the best that we've ever seen in this sport. But look at the size difference between the two. And it really seemed to me in this fight that the edge went to Dominic Cruz because he was the bigger man. Demetrius Johnson caused him all kinds of problems. He kept him on his toes for the whole fight. And he was very competitive throughout. But he was just slightly outpointed by Dominic Cruz at this point. And it made sense for him now, you know, once the flyweight division was made for him to drop down, and he's been undisputed since. He's looked excellent in that division. I mean, you know, the nearest someone's come to beating him was the first Ian McCall fight. And
yeah.
I mean, that was debated hotly. But then when they rematched, Demetrius Johnson won comfortably. So although that was a disappointing loss for him, it was a great learning experience, and it shows you the levels. Obviously, Ray Borg, second amateur fight, Demetrius Johnson already fighting for a world title, right? So then we move on a little bit further. Now we're going into Ray Borg's second professional fight. So at this point, he's got 4 amateur fights under his belt, 3 rear naked chokes and the guillotine, all within the first minute 45. So he's a fast worker. He comes in, he turns pro, he wins his first fight by rear naked choke, and then he's in the second fight. And same thing again, rear naked choke. But this is what I'm talking about, the chaos, his ability to ragdoll people around. Very, very physically powerful. But when he gets him to the floor, the hooks go in and he searches for the back straight away. Again, at this point though, Demetrius Johnson's already the flyweight champion. So you've got to think Ray Borg's setting out in his pro career, watching Demetrius Johnson at the top of the tree and watching him beat Ian McCall, beat Joe Benavidez for the title, and then defend against John Dodson. Now, Dodson gave him a few problems in the first couple of rounds, purely because of his speed and his power. But again, with Demetrius Johnson, it's that consistency over the 5 rounds. He's able to withstand the pressure and the aggression of his opponents and then outpoint them and wear them down until he can get that finish or the decision at the end of it. So, you know, Ray Borg obviously is looking at Demetrius Johnson and seeing all the things that he does right and trying to learn from those. So I think there's a benefit in growing up in the area of the champion that you are then going to fight. I mean, I know that a lot of people are counting Ray Borg out now, but you have to also consider where we've seen this in the past. Everybody was counting Chris Weidman out when he was going into the Anderson Silva fight,
yes.
right? Chris Weidman's first professional fight was happening at the same time as Anderson Silva being the UFC champion. So if we compare those two storylines, you've got to think Ray Borg's got a chance here to come in and upset the apple cart because he's been studying Demetrius Johnson throughout his whole professional career. So you've got to think if somebody's going to come in and beat Demetrius Johnson, it's someone that has understood his style from the very beginnings.
Do you think there's a difference in studying someone to beat them as opposed to studying them because they're very effective at what they do and they're like your hero?
Yes, I think so. I think there's a benefit to both. If you're studying someone because you look up to them and you're their hero, they're your hero, then you are looking at the things that they do well. If you're looking at someone that you want to beat, you're looking at holes in their game.
Right. Now,
I think Ray Borg's in both corners because obviously he looks up to Demetrius Johnson because he was a pioneer of the flyweight division. He was the first champion. He's still the first champion that we've ever had. Yeah. So Borg's looking at him as the milestone in which he needs to reach. So he's looking at all the positives that got him to that point. But at the same time, he signs that UFC contract and now he's a target as well. So he's finding ways into his game.
Well, at that point, I think we should start our next playlist.
Okay.
Because this is maybe where his mentality changes from, look at this guy, doesn't he do things brilliantly, to, I want that guy's belt.
Exactly.
And this is what he's been doing since he came to the UFC.
And he's the things that he did well before he signed with the UFC, he's continued to do well within the UFC. And he's a very exciting individual. He's fast, he's got good footwork, he's quite unpredictable, and there's a chaos about the way that he fights, which I like against Demetrius Johnson. Because he's so good at controlling the chaos, you kind of need someone to bring an unusual look to him. And once he gets in on your legs, you can see the muscularity on his back, his ability to pull people in, to pick them up and move them around. He's got the ideal physique for this weight class. And, you know, you've got to think, as soon as he gets hold of someone, he picks them up and slams them. That's a hit to their ego. The first thing they're going to do is start to scramble, which gives him that opportunity to then start circling around and take the back. Now, if they accept being on the floor, he's got excellent ground and pound. And he'll sit in their guard and he'll smash them to pieces with elbows, again, forcing them to scramble. But these big takedowns here are a big part of his game plan, I think. And it's not just showboating, it's not just kind of, you know, getting some excitement out of the fans. There's a point to this because it gives your opponent 2 options. They either scramble because they're embarrassed that they've been carried across the octagon and slammed, or they accept it because they feel like they're being dominated by a much bigger, physically stronger individual, and then they're on the bottom and they're either getting beat up with elbows and punches, or he's setting up some of these beautiful submissions. It's not just the rear naked choke he's got, he has other options, but the rear naked choke is a very opportunistic submission. You can catch it in the scramble. He's very good at getting his hooks in and hunting for the neck straight away. So I'm going to discuss that in a second. But there are lots of elements to his game which I like and which make this a very exciting prospect for him facing DJ.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I was looking at this as well, I thought it's that chaos. He's got to do something wild to really upset this and find some opportunities. And I think his first elbow against Smolka, cut Smolka.
Oh, yeah.
So he's brilliant with his ground and pound. So if he gets in a top position, he can do damage.
Yeah.
Now, what's the antidote to everything? The complete fighter. Who's the complete fighter?
Demetrius
Johnson.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to make a case against him.
Yeah. But what I was interested in researching this, and as you know, I like to go all the way through their career chronologically so I can see the developments in their game. And the further into DJ's career that you get, the less mistakes he makes, which is strange because then there are less highlights. There are less standout moments because he controls the fight from start to finish.
Right. So that's a good point.
You know, it's unusual because you would think, you know, the pound-for-pound best, you could make hours and hours worth of highlights. But
lots
in
of Joe
actuality,
Rogan woos.
Yeah. It's just those individual things that he does very well, like this against Chris Carriasso. Now, I've spoken about this before, and this is one of the benefits in stance switching, which is really a new development in the past few years of the game. People are really starting to understand the benefits of this. So let's just take a look at this progress forward. Sorry, Joey. I don't want to make a point of him getting that knockout again, but it was beautiful. So look at this. So he's in an orthodox stance here. He throws the overhand. And a lot of the time we see in DJ's fights, but same with Ray Borg, and you kind of feel like Ray Borg's probably learnt this off DJ. He shoots low, he attacks high, and he shoots low. And even when he's got a hold of a leg, he's already punching the head just to kind of keep his opponent, keep their mind occupied so they can't think of everything all at once.
Right.
So watch this. He steps in with the overhand right against Chris Carriasso, but he follows that momentum through. The back leg travels through with the right hand, so he steps into a southpaw position. As you can see, Carriasso's head's down now. Look at this nice little bounce step, just to cover some distance. Then he brings that back knee up. Now, Chris Carriasso's lucky that his head was moving away from this knee because it was perfectly timed. Look at that, right under the chin. Really, really nice. Again, it's that stance switching. It always allows him to hit with power. It always allows him to set up the power shot, the backhand, the back leg. And much like Ray Borg, when he gets a hold of somebody, he's excellent at putting them on the floor, but his focus is clamping onto them, kind of like what Daniel Cormier does.
Right.
He clamps onto them, he controls them. It's controlling that chaos. Then he starts to step out of it. Then he starts to take chances and tries to find his way into the fight. Against Henry Cejudo, a lot of people thought this was going to be a very even match because Cejudo is an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling. DJ came out and put a Muay Thai clinic on him in the first round. Beautiful work. And then his footwork, his ability to move in, cover distance and land shots and move out, but not giving too much ground so he's not allowing his opponent to gather momentum. You see, with a guy like Ray Borg, he likes to crash forward. He likes that momentum on his side. So if DJ can kind of move around him, that's going to stifle that attack. It's going to force him to stop and readjust and stop and readjust. And then that's where DJ finds his way into the fight. So it's all high percentage stuff. It's all the stuff that is most consistent in mixed martial arts for success. You know, he doesn't take too many risks, particularly not in the first couple of rounds.
Do you think that momentum of switching from orthodox to southpaw and moving forward also allows him to find these crazy angles as well? Because he's so smart and he's already moving in a direction and being, I don't know, just the way that his movement patterns work is so irregular, but it works for him brilliantly. Yeah.
Well, see, a lot of combat sports that we've grown up watching, boxing, kickboxing, they're all done in a ring. You get a 90-degree angle, so it's easier to force somebody into a corner without switching your stance.
Yeah.
Now, in an octagon, the angles of the corners are far wider, which means that if you push forward and someone cuts an angle, it takes far more of a bigger step to cut them off again, staying in the same stance.
Yes.
Whereas if you can switch straight through to another stance, you're already in a position to attack them as they're moving against the fence. So, again, you know, we watch guys like Dominic Cruz, obviously, Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, guys that are excellent at switching their stance. They always seem to be able to find a glove to land on their opponent because their feet are always underneath them.
And I guess another underlining point about that is it's so efficient.
Yeah.
There's no wasted movement because you're either getting out of the way of something which you needed to do or you're finding an opportunity to strike as well.
Without a doubt.
OK, let's talk about Ray Borg.
OK.
How does he do this? Right.
His strongest suit is taking the back. The chaotic attack that he has, the chaotic striking, the flying knees, the big takedowns and stuff, it all plays into the ability to take the back. His ability to find that in any scramble. And almost like BJ Penn, his feet work independently of his body. They find their way in to the legs. He finds his hooks while he's thinking about the upper body. So his head and his arms are focused on the upper body, but his legs do a lot of the work in the control. And it's almost like he doesn't really have to think about it. Again, big takedowns. His opponent feels like there's a hit on their ego because they've just been slammed. So they try and scramble, and he takes their back. And look at this drive. Excellent at getting back to his feet. Excellent at shooting in low and then coming up from his knees, which shows you how strong he is in the upper body because he's able to clamp on. Now look at this scramble against Smolka here. Again, the legs controlling the lower body while he's thinking about what his upper body's doing. Capitalises on that and maintains top position, and this is one of my favourites. Look at that. I'm going to rewind it because I think it's worth watching how quickly the far side hook goes in as he's circling around. Circling to the back is something that he's very quick with, as is Demetrius Johnson. You know, it's going to be interesting to see how these two compare on the floor because they're both quick workers. You know, they're good at switching positions. So
tornado.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're the Taz Mexican Devil. So watch this. Now you'll see at the moment he's in a front headlock position, but you can see with his posture he's ready to jump off his right foot and circle round. So what we're expecting him to do here, we're expecting him to take his left hand and come. Let me use that one. So this hand here is going to come all the way over onto this side. He's going to underhook. He's going to clamp onto the back. From that, he can then move the rest of his body around. Now, as you would imagine, when his opponent feels like his back's been exposed, he then starts to turn away from his opponent to get out. That's where the far side hook comes into play. So watch this. The right hand comes over, digs in deep, and then immediately the right hook goes in. So as his opponent's turning, he's actually now pulling his opponent with him. He's turning onto his back, but taking Borg with him as he's doing it. The hook's in, so not only is he thinking about defending the hook, but now the arm's under his neck as well.
That's what impresses me, how tight he got that forearm under the chin. It's crazy.
But it's like, it's the same with DJ hitting high, but already having a control on a leg.
Right.
It's giving your mind two things to think about at once.
Yeah,
you feel the hook's gone in, but now you're defending a choke as well.
Yeah.
You can't do one without the other, but you can't do both at the same time.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It's fascinating to watch him and to watch how he moves. And it's, again, I go back to BJ Penn. We always talk about BJ Penn it's almost like he's got 4 arms instead of two hands and 2 feet. His legs find their way into the positions that he needs to control. Borg does the same thing, particularly in the scrambles, particularly when people are moving very quickly. He reads them, he clamps onto them, and he's always searching for the neck, which allows his legs just to kind of do what they do. OK, well, let's switch it over then and ask you the same question for DJ. You can obviously win a fight many ways, but for this particular fight, what have you got? The arm bars. You know, the Horiguchi one's the one that stands out because it's the record breaker. It's 4 minutes, 59 seconds of the 5th round. Nearly the arm breaker as well. Right? You're never going to beat that record, unless you go 4 minutes, 59 and a half seconds, and we don't even time half seconds. So, I mean, he's a consummate record breaker. He's constantly finding ways to up his game and to challenge the rest of the sport to be as good as he is. The difference with an armbar and a rear naked choke is a rear naked choke is much, in my opinion, much more of an opportunistic situation. Needs setting up. Exactly. An armbar requires a setup. It requires a control at several levels. So watch this. This is the Horiguchi one. Now, interestingly, he goes across mount. Now, anyone that's done traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu knows that generally when you're attacking the armbar on the far side, you circle to the head. It's just an easier way of going about it. Demetrius Johnson doesn't like to go about things the easy way, and because he's so quick, he can get away with things. And he dominated Horiguchi for almost the entire fight at this point. So to be able to then jump straight over, look at that, and also traps the arm. This is also an interesting thing. You can see that the right knee is trapping the arm, so he knows that that's one less barrier of defence that Horiguchi's got in this position. Immediately steps over and wastes no time. Seconds are counting down on the clock here. Steps over, slides up to the elbow to control. Look how he's clamping it with his head and shoulder as well. You just go back one scene so you can just have another look at that. Look at that. See, these are the minute details that a lot of people miss. Now, in this position, I'll be honest, I wouldn't even think about that. I'd be trying to control it with my arm as I'm stepping over to take it. But he's clamped with his head and his shoulder. This is why he's got fat ears, because he's using that. He's using it as a biting point. He's controlling the arm, so as he's stepping over, he's not going to lose it in the scramble. It's not perfect, though, Dan. His label's out. Ah, that's true, that's true. He will be disappointed about that. He will be disappointed about that. Well, you know, that's something for his coaches to be watching out for in the future. But look at that. I mean, absolutely beautiful. And immediately clamps on, locks his knees together. Beautiful work. he's so consistent with this. Like we saw it in his last fight against Hayes as well. Just watch this. I mean, Hayes was done at this point. Yeah. This was a much earlier submission, but Hayes is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. There was no effort to escape that.
No.
Sometimes people are just broken mentally by the way that they're dominated by Demetrius Johnson, because they struggle to find a way into the fight. And that's why he's so impressive, because he controls every stage of the fight. You know?
Need a plan A, a plan B, a plan C.
Yeah.
And is that?
And a couple of mates to tag in if it starts getting too much. It's that's kind of the stage it's getting to at the moment. Demetrius Johnson, in order to be challenged, has got to look outside of his weight class now, I think. If Borg doesn't do it, I'm not counting him out.
Yeah. Well, let's look at some training footage then, because he's switched up camps a little while ago and ended up with the guys down at Jackson Wink.
Yeah.
I saw a few patterns in a few things that he was doing, like the Romero leg clear. He was really big on this against Scoggins, and I thought, OK, DJ could take advantage of that. Also crossing his feet.
Yep.
We spoke about that with Frankie. But he's not doing these things as much or as amplified. And I think that's because he's working down at Jackson Wink.
It's always a benefit to go into one of these super gyms that are used to looking at high-level athletes. Right. So you've got to think, he was working with Tom Vaughan at Fit NHB for a long while. Now, if you've been working with one coach for a long while, to an extent, they kind of stop seeing some of your mistakes because they're so familiar with watching you every day. They've taught you, the majority of what you know. It's always nice to then take a great athlete and put him into a camp with world-class coaches and see kind of what they pick out, because it's only going to be the minute details at this level of the game.
Yeah.
So if you've got Jackson Wink in there, obviously Greg Jackson is a mastermind when it comes to mixed martial arts, as is Mike Winklejohn, especially with the striking arts. So they're going to look at him and they're going to look at any bad habits he's got, any consistent mistakes that he makes, and just kind of polish them up. They're not there to teach Ray Borg the Jackson Wink style of fighting.
Right.
Because he's already an excellent fighter.
Yes.
They just need to take away these vulnerabilities and give him a few more high percentage moves. Obviously, the rear naked choke is a very high percentage move, but as you were pointing out, the sweeping, the crossing of the feet, they're just bad habits that he probably picked up earlier in his career and has never probably needed to correct because he's never been paid for. He's never paid for it.
Yeah. On the other side, you can take an athlete, you can look at what they do, what they have, and have a great mind as well, and use all of that and just plug it into Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah.
And that is what Matt Hume's done. And what a partnership they have made.
It's beautiful when you see a high-level fighter and a high-level coach come together and have such a good understanding. Matt Hume has been around since the very, very beginning of the sport. He was heavily involved in Pride as a judge. You said he wrote the rules for Pride as well.
I think he was part of that, yeah.
He's been around so long, so not only has he seen the sport come into the modern day, but he's also seen the consistencies of the game, the things that have fallen away, the things that worked really well, the things that are... you can look at the stats for the past 15 years of UFC fights, and you can see the submissions that are higher percentage in comparison to others. And he's done that across the whole game. So, again, he's taken any small bad habits, any mistakes that he makes, and just taken them out. So he's a high percentage fighter. Although he moves fast, everything's very, very calculated. And another thing that I like about these two as a partnership is they're very similar in the way that they think about things.
Right.
Matt Hume's an analyst. He pulls things apart. He finds patterns in people's games and finds ways to kind of deconstruct them and build Demetrius Johnson's game plan to suit what he's going to be facing. Demetrius Johnson, as the consummate video gamer, is used to working to a set of rules. He's working to combinations that... It's a very analytical mindset that they both have. Do you know what I mean?
I do,
and it's very easy for Matt Hume to sit Demetrius Johnson down and go, this is what you're very good at, and this is what we need to do to beat this guy. And almost like the relationship with Faraz and GSP. It's almost like Faraz just kind of sits down as a computer programmer and programs his fighter and then sends him out. Exactly that.
Yeah.
And Demetrius Johnson is that.
So UFC 216 is coming up. Will history be made by Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, or will we see one of the biggest upsets in recent times? Thanks to everyone that got involved on social media. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out the other episode of Inside the Octagon where Dan and I check out Tony Ferguson versus Kevin Lee. From both of us, enjoy the fights. We'll see you soon.